This week, we re-present my 2014 interview with Sean Howe, author of Marvel Comics, The Untold Story, a great history of the great comics publisher. Howe uncovered the truth behind some industry rumors and some beefs between creators, some of which were finally swept away by Sean's book itself. This is a flashback to episode 410 from July 7th, 2014. First, as always, I'd like to thank our patrons for helping to keep the show going. You can pitch in by pledging at least $2 a month at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Okay, I'm talking with Sean Howe, author of Marvel Comics, The Untold Story. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Where are you based? Are you in New York?
I am in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, cool.
I mean, you may even hear traffic or horns or something like that in the background at some point. Yeah.
Okay. So what inspired you to write this book?
I think just having grown up reading all the the mythology around the Marvel bullpen and feeling like it was almost a surrogate. I say surrogate family. I guess it sounds like there was something missing from my own family, but it was like an extended family, an extended surrogate family. And I don't know. Did you grow up? What's your background? And then I'll be able to bounce off of that appropriately. When were you? When were you reading this stuff?
Okay. I was born in 1965, and my brother and I were growing up. We had a friend who had a bunch of his older brother had bought a bunch of Marvels in the 60s. So we'd read those whenever we went to his house. And then we really started our own buying of Marvels about 1978, starting with, of course, Spider-Man, and then kind of branching out from there.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess
the Stan Lee mythology was in full swing, and something that I'm not even sure how much that is the case. If somebody is like 20 years old right now, I mean, they see Stan Lee on TV, but it's not like they've been having him in their ear the whole time that they're growing up.
Right.
And so when you're reading those letters pages, during those eras, you're kind of like, oh yeah, like that's practically my Uncle Stan Lee,
Yeah, well, and the whole writing style of everything, especially that was directed, directly at readers, tended to be kind of imitation Stan Lee, trying to keep that same vibe. I remember. Yeah. Now, when did you grow up? What was your what was going on in comics when you were a kid?
So I was born in '74, and I probably. The end of the 70s was my first exposure to the comics, but then also, the Spider-Man TV show and the Hulk TV show, and soon after, the cartoons, inundated from every direction. And the first time that I went to a comic book store, an actual, not just kidding, not at the drugstore spinner rack. The first time I went to a comic store was like 82 or 83. And that was just like an exciting, like, I talk about this a little bit in the book. It's like it just was a really shiny time for superhero comics.
You walk in, it's like,
oh. Yeah, I mean, really, what sealed it for me was, when there was the handbook of the Marvel Universe. And, you put that in the hands of a 9-year-old who kind of likes this stuff. And, it's kind of like, oh, I need to memorize this. It's almost like it's like the most compulsive homework that you could possibly have. Just there's so much information in that, and it all, it was kind of like a predecessor of what I think the general populace feels now when they become just totally invested in this serial TV that has its own universe. Except I was 9 and there weren't TV recaps, to feel like I was connecting. I just had to wait for those letters pages, and it was, I grew up in a small town, and so just the possibilities of the Kirby spawned huge universe. There was really nothing to compare that to. I was really into the Star Wars movies, but it was nothing compared to how I felt about Marvel. So to grow up and then at times kind of fade in and out of comics at various points in my life, comics reading, and then I guess probably around the early 2000s I started reading a lot of interviews with creators who were responsible for that stuff, and by that time enough, which I guess people were already really dishing the truth in things like the Comics Journal, but for some reason that didn't totally reach me. So I guess it was as an adult, finding out that there was a lot more to this story than I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Well, I experienced that a lot reading this and noticing all the stuff that was going on in the background. At the time that I was reading, I had no idea what was actually happening or why certain things happened. How long did it take you to put this together?
I guess I had been thinking about it for about, let's see, I put together, I guess it was 2008 that I started working on the proposal in earnest. And, it was published in 2012. Mm-hmm. So, is that right?
Yeah. So 4 years.
2012. Yeah. So
4 years from idea to publication.
4 years. And I would say 2.5 really solid years of just working on it. Mm-hmm. And really, perhaps investing too much, of my life at times into it. And of course, it's such it's a 70-year history. And so of course, it just scratches the surface in a sense.
Yeah.
I would actually, I would love for their, plenty of people have offered me, corrections on, oh, you say, modeling with Millie instead of Millie the model in this instance, but I would love for there to be, just a more active historian community, working to get a lot of these stories down, because I do feel like, it's a history that can be much improved upon.
Well, has anyone come out and I could find little details that maybe could have been corrected too, but has anyone pointed out any major things that they said were major mistakes?
Well, the thing is, they've often been, it's been something that I thought, oh, good catch of a minor point, and someone had said, there's a major problem with this book. If any are coming around right now, lay them out right now in public. If two of them come right to your mind, and I'll make sure that it's, and then I'll have people to keep me honest and know that I have to correct it.
Well, there were some points where you said the X-Men instead of Uncanny X-Men. Although later you start calling it Uncanny X-Men, but
I started calling it I started calling it Uncanny X-Men. I think because when it became necessary to differentiate
from the adjectiveless version, yeah,
and those things. There were just many like rounds with proofreaders about about exactly that, like Uncanny versus X-Men. I mean, those are the kinds of things that when you set out to do something like this, you don't realize that you're going to be spending so much time worrying about those things. Yeah.
Well, there was another place where I thought you got something wrong, and then later it came up again, and you hadn't gotten it wrong. About Omega the Unknown. This is actually kind of a favorite of mine, that series. So Steve Gerber was writing it with Mary Screenis. Is that how you pronounce it? Screens.
Yeah.
And so for whatever, I don't remember why exactly, but it ends up they have to stop before they're really done with their story. And it says in the book that it was going to be continued in Defenders, and then it never happened. But then later you mention actually they did not. Gerber wasn't writing it, but they did kind of finish the story in Defenders.
So maybe I did get it wrong. So maybe that is a misstated thing in the beginning.
Well, yeah, to say that it never happened isn't true. But you later say that it does happen. So.
But this is useful. I will go back and fix it. Thank you.
Sure.
It's all in the interest of making a better version eventually. So.
Yeah, I mean, you got to keep refining it, and yeah, it's got to. There are a lot of plates you got to keep spinning to put together a book like this.
Yeah.
I was wondering how many comics you read when you were researching. You must have read a lot of Marvel and other publishers' comics.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually impossible to even gauge. And I mean, I had read so many. It wasn't like I reread everything that I ended up mentioning in there. Especially when it comes down to like if I'm just like mentioning, I don't even know if this is in there at this point, but if I mentioned, like Mike Zeck doing Captain America, those are things that I have fond memories of those comics, but I don't think I ever got around to rereading them, and I might characterize them a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Did you reread the Clone Saga?
There's so many. Sorry.
Did you reread the Clone Saga?
What I did was read parts of it for the first time. I was not reading Marvel comics in the mid '90s.
Okay.
And that was actually a big concern of mine at some point. I spent a lot of time trying to make sure that I was giving a fair shake to the stuff that came out when I, subjectively had not been as interested, and I didn't want to just discount. It's very easy for everyone to just say, Marvel comics in the '90s were terrible, but I just wanted to make sure that I was not missing, a whole ton of great mid '90s comics.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really had anything to offer me, and nobody really said, "Oh, you've got to read this." I mean, I'd read Marvels at the time. I don't know how closely you were or weren't following Marvel comics in the mid '90s.
Actually, yeah, I've mentioned this on the show before, but the Clone Saga was what brought me back to comics. Because a friend of mine, I had really, during college, I just didn't have time, and I kind of let it slide, and I read some things that my brother had bought, like, after I graduated, and then I came to Japan, and it didn't even have anything available, and so I was really out of it, and then a friend of mine said, oh yeah, Spider-Man's clone came back, and it's been really interesting, so... And I was working on a military base at the time, so I could buy them there. And then eventually I got into mail order comics, but I started buying everything else again. But yeah, that was what brought me back. Ironically, since it scared a lot of other people away, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's also, it's true that. The subjectivity is a really important thing to consider, I think, because I still don't like the way that the superhero comics of the 1990s look. There's not, I don't think that you can definitively say that it was better or worse than superhero comics of the 80s looked. You can argue about how the anatomy, how accurate the anatomy is, but when you're talking about cartooning, anatomy doesn't necessarily, Jack Kirby's anatomy isn't all that at times either. So it's hard for me to it's hard for me to know to really rail too much against what most people would consider the nadir of the art form. Because I know that it worked for its target audience, and and I think a lot of people have fond memories that they go back and they still works for them. And there's, but I will say that, I'm not a huge fan of I guess what people would call like the image look.
Well, let's go back to the 60s here, because when you're talking about Marvel, that's really kind of the epicenter of everything. And of course Lee and Kirby and Ditko and all that, and sprinkled pretty much all the way through the book, well, until Kirby finally passes away in, what was it, 94. There, every so often we get another, like, Lee is kind of taking credit for everything. Kirby's kind of taking credit for everything. It's kind of sad to read how that they're both kind of claiming that the other. Well, Kirby will kind of explicitly say Stan, or he always says Stanley. Stanley didn't do anything. Right. I did everything. Stanley's just an office worker. And then, 2020 will do a story about Marvel, and they give Stan Lee credit for everything, and, he doesn't seem to dispute it at all.
Right.
And now, in the book, I didn't detect you giving any editorializing about it or trying to say who was right or wrong. It was just kind of he said, she said. But what do you make of this kind of, the overlapping claims of responsibility for those characters?
Yeah. Well, that makes me really happy to hear you say that you didn't get a lot of, glaring bias.
Yeah.
Because I was trying very, very, very hard to do that. At the same time, I think that there are, it's indisputable that Jack Kirby during his lifetime did not get enough credit for what he did.
Right.
At least, he did among certain circles, obviously, but in the wider world of casual comic fans and and non-comics fans, absolutely not.
Yeah, well, in terms of getting like a written credit or getting paid a good percentage.
I mean, or even just being interviewed by TV stations, and I think that's that's where it must have been really hard to take watching Stan Lee go, on his publicity.
He was much more of a publicity hound than Kirby, I think.
Sure, right. I think, I tend, especially after working on the book and even in the months subsequent to the publication of the book, I think more and more I lean toward thinking Jack Kirby did the lion's share of what was really great about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that Stan Lee does not get enough credit as I think people tend to move into two camps, and I think that people tend to use Kirby's achievements to knock down Stan Lee. I think that Stan Lee was an amazing editor and a talent scout, and I think that the dialogue that he wrote was, in fact, a huge part of the success, the aesthetic success of the comics, and the commercial success. And as an ambassador of comics, it's the Marvel phenomenon would not have happened if Stan Lee had not been, using his kind of Carnival Barker personality, and also being a genuine, I guess ambassador is the best word, in terms of really trying to get people to take comics seriously as an important part of American culture.
Which is kind of odd when you could consider that he, privately he wasn't really sold. He didn't use his real name because he thought eventually he was going to be writing some real literature and didn't want to be dragged down by the association with comics. Yeah, I mean,
no one can really know his motivations at different times, but I think that by the late '60s, I think that he had seen that comics could be, really, that superhero comics could be something really remarkable. And I think by the early '70s, his own frustrations with his career, I think had kind of turned him against believing that comic books could accomplish as much as Hollywood could. There's two things that I put in my book. Well, there's one thing in particular that I put in my book that I have sort of been astounded that more people who reviewed it did not talk about, and that is that in the early '70s, Stan Lee was publicly saying, if you have an idea for that if you're a cartoonist and you have an idea, don't give it to a publisher. Take it somewhere. Take it to Hollywood where they'll at least let you. You'll get the money and you'll own it. And I think that's really remarkable moment of candor for him, because he never before or since really spoke out against the comics industry like that. And in fact, what was happening at the time is he was actually trying to get into. He was frustrated that he didn't feel like he was getting paid enough, and he and Jack Kirby had left, and he was about to go on. He ended up taking a sabbatical, and he came back and was named president and publisher. And so, it didn't behoove him to repeat those sentiments again.
Well, yeah, I came out of this feeling kind of conflicted about kind of how to feel about Stan Lee, because I do think that he did have he is really important to what was in those comics. Maybe Kirby tried to marginalize him overly, but yeah, I think he did write the dialogue, and yeah, his personality did a lot to raise the profile of comics. I wonder if he hasn't, what I want to say, tried to blame the bad things on someone else and say that he didn't have any control over that. Like when you were just saying that he said, like, don't take your idea to a comics publisher. I'm not sure. Well, whose fault is it exactly that comics were operating that way, where comics would would own anything that you did? Did he not have any control over that? Could he not have kind of stood up for creators' rights back then?
I think that he could have, but he was still an employee and an employee of people who weren't going to be swayed by his what he might have said at that point. I actually find it much more problematic that he later on gave depositions about for the Jack Kirby versus Marvel, or the Kirby family versus Marvel. He gave depositions that really kind of diminished Kirby's contributions. And he certainly, for him to stand up, for Jack Kirby, which certainly involves sticking his neck out, at this point, because he does have an agreement with Marvel, that he is sort of a spokesperson in some capacity. But it sure would be a good thing for his legacy, I think. But it's probably too much to expect that to change at this point. Yeah. I do think that Stan Lee, I do think that people who've decided that they don't like Stan Lee, I do think that they tend to demonize him much more than he deserves. But having never worked with the guy, I'm not. I can't say, definitively if they're.
Did you get to talk to him when you were putting the book together?
I talked to him a little bit, but I actually, I talked to him on the phone. But when it came time to talk in person, I flew out to L.A. and his office canceled on me, and never to this day has given me an explanation.
Wow.
They told me that, in fact, I was told that, that it wouldn't be possible to reschedule. And when I kept pressing for why is this, I was told, all I can tell you is that I'm very sorry. He cannot speak with you. And that was a very upsetting experience for him. Not least because it's expensive to just buy a ticket to Los Angeles.
Right.
But also, I worried that, I don't know. I guess I worried most. I think at that point, I knew that I was not going to actually get much new information out of him because no one really does. I don't know the last time that anyone's gotten a really thoughtful, novel answer to a question from Stanley. But I will admit that I worried, like, how's it going to look that I don't have a lot of Stan Lee quotes in this book that are from my own interviews. I've only got, from the short, time that I, had with him phone calls. And as it turned out, I think I don't think it really mattered that much. I think that I think that I was able to find, enough unpublished stuff that he had told people, that I probably got more out of that than I would have, sitting in Los Angeles and hearing him.
Yeah, I didn't feel like there was a dearth of mention of things that he'd said or written or whatever. You feel Stan kind of coming in every so often, and we see what's going on with him. So it didn't feel like it was missing.
Well, that's good. That's good.
It occurred to me reading this, I don't remember that it was explicitly stated, but after what happened in the 50s with Wortham and Seduction of the Innocent and how comics had such a black eye at that point, when Stan and Jack and Steve Ditko, and when those books came out, and with Stan Lee's promotional talents, it seems like that, well, and I suppose along with the Batman TV show, but it seems like it went a fairly long way towards rehabilitating comics in the public eye. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the Batman TV show did.
Well, and the stuff that Marvel was doing at the time.
Yeah, I would. Yes, definitely. Unfortunately, it only, it really only brought superheroes back to the spotlight.
Yeah.
It's so strange, when you sort of take a step back and look at, what a random kind of genre
it's such a historical accident
and continued to dominate an art form. That's certainly no. I guess some people would say that's some fault of Marvel, but it's really, I'm thankful that they came along and kind of got people reading comics.
Yeah. Well, I guess if we have to choose between comics being portrayed as evil and being cheesy, I guess we would choose cheesy.
Well, I guess, but but why should you have to choose one of those, right?
Right. Well, I think we might be moving beyond cheesy now.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I think in the last 15 years, I think that more sophisticated variations of comic books have certainly, caught the public's attention. And although not, it seems, the moment of Dan Clowes and Chris Ware, the kind of early 2000s moment where everybody was excited to figure out what this graphic novel thing was. That seems to have kind of given way again to comic books being really about superheroes or superhero movies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear a lot about I don't hear about new comics as literature, like people were writing about a lot 15 years ago. The David Mazzucchelli book was a kind of recent example of that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Asterius Paula.
We need some more Persepolises. We need some more nice hardcover non-genre comics. It would be nice to have that just integration with literature be kind of consummated at last.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was struck by how I guess I hadn't quite appreciated how the 60s Marvel stuff so explicitly commented on social issues.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to it's a lot of fun to see that unfold.
And Kirby talks about how comics is journalism, and you can comment on things going on through comics.
Mm-hmm. The stuff where like Stan Lee is obviously grappling with the changing times and political tumult is really entertaining. It's really it just watching him go from kind of a mildly uptight kind of like a soft. He kind of remains a soft liberal who doesn't really want to. He kind of wants to stay in with the kids, but he doesn't know how far is too far. And it's very much like a politician who's looking at polls.
Mm.
And it's the anything that has to do with like Vietnam is just like he's so out of his depth.
Yeah, speaking of out of their depth, it's striking how Marvel is sold from company to company several times over the decades, and it always seems like whoever owns Marvel doesn't get comics, and they're constantly kind of shooting themselves in the foot. I'd written down a few examples where like they had built up this fan club, Merry Marvel Marching Society, and then the suits forced them to close it down, even though you say it's the fan club that had excited the most dedicated segment of the audience. That seems like such a horrible business decision.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that really kind of put a light bulb over my head was somebody telling me about the guy who was in charge of marketing in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And the realization that this guy saw, he's the one who had I think come up with like different colored M&Ms that you could sell and package in all these different ways. And the person who was telling me this said they had argued with him, this isn't like, these aren't M&Ms you're making. This is not, this is not just like putting a different widget on the conveyor belt. Like this is creativity. This is people writing stories and drawing things. And this is not something that you can just double the production of without things suffering. This is there are human beings that are needed, in this process, and they have, and creativity, it can't just be duplicated and copied. And I think that with, the various owners, I think you see, a lot of people who, don't understand how business, how a culture business works, and they only see the numbers game, and that's definitely a formula for failure.
Yeah, and also there's a good example of how the business people may have underestimated what it takes to create a successful comic character when New World Pictures buys Marvel and the suits come in and like, here are some characters that we came up with, make new comic books about them. And, they were such amateurishly drawn characters with no depth to them. And the creative people didn't want to deal with these characters, but they had to. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I found myself time and time again when I was working on this, just trying to, I just personally, I always tend to relate more to the suffering artist, I guess, than to the businessman. And I did have to, keep reminding myself to try to look at it from all the different angles, because it's easy to just kind of have a knee-jerk, reaction. And I do understand that there are especially not at the top of the ladder, but, in terms of, someone who's in marketing, they are trying to, to pay their bills, and they've got, editors saying, I know this sells more, but I don't want to do it that way. And I definitely learned to appreciate, how this, how business, let me figure out how to phrase this.
The tension between art and commerce.
Well, yeah, I guess how, and how almost impossible it is to maintain that balance, and that a lot of the worst mistakes come not from like one boneheaded decision, but from people making a lot of just compromises along the way. I'm not articulating myself very well, but
can you give me an example of that from the book?
Probably not. Probably not. I've talked myself into a corner here, but we'll just. But I'll just suffice to say, I don't see the business interests are always the bad guys in the way here. Sorry for that muddle.
Coming up, all the Marvel TV shows and movies that didn't get made, the corporate origins of Dazzler and She-Hulk, druggy 70s books, the Jim Shooter era, and what can aspiring comics creators learn from this book? This podcast is part of the Deconstructing Comics Network, where we're grateful to our supporters on Patreon. Patrons get exclusive extra content. Pledge $2 a month or more and get Batman 66 podcast Bat Bits, where we're discussing writer and script editor Lorenzo Semple's Bat Notes memo, in which he lays out guidelines for writing Batman scripts. We've recently also discussed a TV Guide interview with Yvonne Craig as she was beginning her run as Batgirl, early versions of the scripts for Bookworm and Penguin episodes from Season 1, and more. At $4 a month, you also get our monthly show Silver Age Batman, where I'm moving through the book Batman in the 50s issue by issue, discussing each story and sometimes laughing at them, with a rotating second chair of Paul, Emmett, Patrick, or Kumar. Follow our Patreon for free and get access to the first 2 episodes of both Bat-Bits and Silver Age Batman. Check it out at patreon.com/deconcomics, and thanks for your support.
Hello, I'm Ken Holzhauser, and if you're looking for something new in comic books, may I recommend my newest comic, The Quick and the Dad, a love letter to the DC, Marvel, Archie, and Harvey comics of my youth. This comic has everything. It has spaceships, dad jokes, alien invasions, time travel, supervillains, and so many bad puns. Hopefully you'll like it. It's the cutest comic you've never heard of, and it's available today in print and digital from indieplanet.com. That's The Quick and the Dad. Join that other dynamic duo, won't you?
Also, it's interesting to see, like Stan Lee was trying to get Marvel characters into other media for decades, and it seems like the majority of those efforts failed for some time. And not just, there were some, TV shows, and I guess hardly any movies really until the 90s. But it's just striking how much didn't happen that almost happened.
Yeah, and I guess probably around, 72 is when he starts to really become preoccupied with that. And, I think it's 76 that Universal licenses a bunch of characters, which will, soon bear fruit with, a Spider-Man TV show and a Hulk TV show and a Doctor Strange TV movie. And I guess maybe there's Captain America TV movie came out of that too. But after that, you've got the Spider-Man rights. I mean, what happened with the Spider-Man movie, or the concept of a Spider-Man movie, and how, that would make a great documentary. It's just, the long uphill battle to get a Spider-Man movie made, because of, just the weirdest of circumstances. Signing with companies that were going bankrupt and messing up paperwork, and they were ready to roll in like 85, by the time it was, by the time the Spider-Man movie came out, Stan Lee was like an old man.
Although you could argue it was just as well, because the movie making technology could handle a concept like that so much better by the time they actually made it.
Yeah, that's probably true. It is funny. The Superman movie came out in 78, and granted, it's not, not a lot of big special effects in that movie, but between the 3 Star Wars movies and Blade Runner and Alien, you have enough to go with to put out a superhero movie, I think, in the early 80s. But by all means, things start kicking up, around the time of, I guess, Terminator 2, and then again, around the millennium. But so in a way, it's for the viewer, it's great to be rewarded with all those special effects, but it must have been horrendously frustrating to know that these were great stories that people would want to watch, and to have Hollywood scoff at it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it must be incredibly satisfying for Stan Lee to, you know, kind of be alive to see
sure. Yeah, I had the same thought. Yeah, he stuck around long enough to see his dream finally happen, and all these Marvel movies are coming out now.
Yeah. It must be. If he was the kind of person who kept a diary, which I am sure he is not, you know, I bet it would be a thrill to go back and see, you know, nobody understand. Everybody laughed when I mentioned a character named The Thing. It's beautiful, you know.
Mm-hmm. I had not heard before that Dazzler was created as supposed to be a tie-in with like a music act, or there was talk about Donna Summer being the disco queen or something and playing this character.
Yeah. You know, there's a magazine called Comics Feature that was around in the early 80s. And I don't know why I happen to remember this right now, but Comics Feature number 7 has a very long roundtable conversation between the committee of writers that were involved in coming up with the Dazzler, and it's really terrific reading. The funny thing is, I just noticed recently that Jim Shooter, when he was running a website, when he was posting to his website, denied that story about Casablanca Records and Donna Summer, denied that had any validity to it.
Huh.
But you know, there were five Marvel people talking in an interview about it in 1980. So I think it holds some water.
Hmm. Yeah, it was. I remember. You know, of course, I remember Dazzler appearing in Uncanny X-Men, and then they put her out in her own title, and it was such a disappointing read. I remember, like, the Dazzler title was just. I don't remember who was working on it now, but I didn't find it interesting at all.
Yeah, I've never, you know, I'm always, for some reason, I always feel like it's just bad form to, in the book, I didn't really want to, you know, criticize people's art too much, but I have to say, you know, seeing Frank Springer's name at the beginning of a comic book was always kind of like my shoulders would shrug a little bit. And I think it was Frank Springer who was doing the Dazzler.
That sounds familiar.
And, it just really sort of the least kinetic kind of artwork, and that was also it was a time where you were seeing the Jim Shooter kind of production line a little bit, where all the there's just like a lot of really heavy word ballooning going on, and it's a lot of characters in stiff positions, everything is just kind of excruciatingly straightforward, which works with some people. In fact, I think Jim Shooter, I think his Avengers comics kind of work really well with that. And George Perez is obviously, there's a little stiffness to his art too, but there's enough rendering of details that it kind of keeps the interest of your eye.
Mm-hmm. The stuff about the early 70s, I was a little young to be... I didn't really read Marvel at that point. I was still buying Gold Key and Harvey. But I had not... I mean, what I read about that stuff, like the Steve Gerber and the Englehart and all that, what I read about in your book made me feel like digging through Comixology and finding some of that stuff, because it sounds really wild.
Oh, yeah, I would highly recommend a lot of stuff. That was kind of the... now it's hard to remember if some of this stuff, if I read it before or after, but I know that there was a lot of early 70s stuff that I found myself discovering for the first time. A lot. I think the Steve Englehart stuff in particular. I'd read the Captain America Steve Engleharts before, but everyone talks about the Jim Starlin Captain Marvel, and I think rightfully so. But after Jim Starlin left, Steve Englehart did a number of issues with Al Milgrom, and those are really entertaining. Those are, those are just as kind of off the wall psychedelic as anything Starlin did, I think. There's a scene that is clearly meant to convey the idea that Rick Jones has dropped acid, and when he switches with Captain Marvel is like having a weird trip, and he talks about his jaw tingling, and Rick. I might have said Rick Jones. And Rick Jones is saying, "Oh yeah, somebody at the concert gave me some vitamin C." and you read that and you think, definitely no editor ever saw this.
Well, that brings... I wanted to... Yeah. Who is it that you said was receiving complimentary joints in the mail from readers?
Oh, that was Starlin. Yeah.
But yeah, about nobody ever editing that. Well, around that point, they have that kind of weird formulation of the writer-editor.
Right.
And it's always seemed like kind of a strange idea. I mean, in what other medium has ever anyone been, set up like, okay, you can write this book and then just put it out and nobody's going to check anything in it.
Yeah.
And I remember reading some Len Wein Amazing Spider-Man some years ago where he wrote and edited it, and there were some kind of inconsistencies in, like, Spidey's here, and then a couple panels later he's all the way over there, and how did he get over there? It's like nobody was quite paying attention to panel sequence, or how things were progressing in the story.
Yeah. I mean, it's I don't know if Starlin actually had I don't think he had an editor credit, because I think that was a little bit before that was. I think Roy Thomas and then Marv Wolfman were the ostensible editors on those, and I think they had like proofreaders, but
they'd make deals to say like, I won't change your stuff and you don't change my stuff, or something.
Right. Right. But yeah, I mean, I can't imagine not wanting an editor in some capacity. I mean, I thank God I had an editor on the book, but exactly for those reasons, like, just to catch the, to keep Spider-Man from teleporting all over the page.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that you pointed out how the Stan Lee 60s characters tended to be longing orphans, where the 70s characters had righteous Oedipal anger. Do you think that was kind of a zeitgeist thing, generational thing, like it's post-Vietnam?
Yeah, well, I guess you could probably say that it's like, since the '60s characters were generated by only a handful of people.
Mm-hmm.
I guess and they were all born in the 20s or 30s.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the generational answer is a pretty good one. I mean, I guess there was it was also just kind of the in the '70s breaking with tradition, because it wasn't so much that the early Marvel characters set the stage for orphans as superheroes. Superman and Batman were in effect, I guess, as well, which I probably neglected to mention in that, paragraph that you're quoting from. But yeah, I mean, there was, it's probably the generation gap raising its head.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. So speaking of characters created for business reasons, She-Hulk. Just like, we need to get a female Hulk out there before somebody else does.
Yeah. And I think Spider-Woman was the same thing. I forget there was actually, I think, I don't know if it was a Hanna-Barbera character. Was it Web Woman? Was there a character named Web Woman on TV?
There might have been.
Yeah, there was something that was pretty close to Spider-Woman, and I think that was also kind of a preemptive strike before somebody took the trademark.
Well, there was a Spider-Woman cartoon on TV, I remember too, at some point. Was she created?
Spider-Woman?
Yeah, was she created for the TV show, and then, or how? I'm not remember the sequence.
No,
of events
it was just to get the trademark going. I think she ended up. I think you're right, though. I think in the early '80s she popped up in cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
That was. It was just a case of Stan Lee or one of the lawyers saying, Archie Goodwin, you better write us a character named Spider-Woman.
It must have been tough to decide what to keep in and what to leave out, because as you said, this could have been twice as long if you put everything in. Yeah. Because I noticed a couple of things that I was a little surprised that you didn't mention. So you talk about in the early '80s how the mood among the actual full-time staff at Marvel was so kind of jolly and people playing pranks and stuff. I was a little surprised you didn't mention Assistant Editors Month.
Did I not? I'm surprised too.
Yeah, because I didn't see it in there anywhere. But yeah, I remember that very clearly in '83 that they had that month where the assistant editors are taking over all the books while the editors are out somewhere.
Yeah, me too. That I have holds a very special place in my heart. I was really into that.
And the Avengers man on David Letterman.
Yeah. There's so many of them, and even I've gone back and looked at some of the ones that I, the titles that I had not been reading, and there's some pretty great stuff in the most random of places. I think there's a really good there's some really good Al Milgrom cartoons of Annie Nocenti maybe in like the Hulk. But it's actually kind of amazing. There's a lot of people who really fondly remember that stuff, and it's I would imagine that it won't be long before that gets collected into a paperback. Because every time somebody brings up Assistant Editors Month, everyone else is like, oh yeah, that was the best. There's a long Fred Hembeck Spider-Man and maybe Marvel Tales that's pretty great too. But yeah, I wonder if I wrote something for that just got cut, because I am kind of surprised that's not in there.
Yeah, because it felt like you were kind of building up to talking about it, and then it didn't get mentioned. Like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I noticed that I didn't see in there was Spidey Super Stories, the crossover with the Electric Company TV show in the 70s. I thought that I had maybe mentioned that in a half a sentence or something, just in terms of them, Marvel branching out into different markets. But, a lot of, I will say that the one bias, that explains away a lot of what I didn't write about was, the Marvel Universe itself, was kind of the through line in a sense, because I wanted to talk about this is the most fictional, or the most intricate fictional narrative that the world has ever known, and so there's no mention of the Transformers in there. There's no mention of G.I. Joe, and there's maybe a sentence about Conan the Barbarian, and so I've heard, I've heard from a lot of people who are not happy that those are neglected. But I guess Spidey Super Stories would kind of fall into that category as well. And in some respects, the assistant editors, the best of their hijinks do not exist within the Marvel universe. But I do think that I should have mentioned. I had something in there about G.I. Joe, and it was the first time there was a television ad for a comic book, and that did not. I realized after the fact did not make it into the final book, but I do think that G.I. Joe's importance merits a mention. And I don't know if you were a fan of Hasbro tie-ins, but I was a little too old for that. I remember it happening, but I was like, well, whatever.
Yeah. Apparently Transformers was transformative for a lot of people. I'm sure. But yeah, the 80s, the shooter era is really painful to read. That's maybe the most painful part of the whole story, is how the bad feelings between Shooter and just about everybody, it just kind of poisoned the whole thing. Yeah. I do wish I had a really great long in-person interview with Jim Shooter. Talked for about 3 hours. And we got up to 1978, talking through his career, and he was really great and just really generous with his answers. I felt like he was thoughtful and seemed like he was enjoying himself, and so we made plans to do it, to meet again, and I was never really able to really get much contact with him after that. And and then finally, I after the phone calls didn't work, and then the emails didn't, he asked me to email him instead, and then I eventually just said, look, here are things that I'd like you to address that people have said. And he never wrote back to me. And, I do think that that section, would be all the better for his responses to some of that stuff.
There are a lot of accusations against him there, but he doesn't respond to them.
Yeah, you'll notice that when he does in interviews talk about, sometimes it's kind of straw man stuff, but where he'll kind of say, "Oh, people say this about me," and he'll bring up things that people don't really care about anyway. But he doesn't really ever talk about the screening or the actual the actual social part of being a manager. It's always about if somebody was professional and if he didn't like the way an artist was doing something. But the thing that I would really love to get his response to is the people that he terrified. And I guess a lot of the bad stuff that people said about him I didn't even put in the book. I mean, not that it was anything like
baby murderer or something.
Yeah. It wasn't even stuff that would be like actionable. It was. I just didn't want to just kind of gang up on him because a lot of people will say, the people who worked there and had all these problems with him, a lot of them say like, I think he did a lot of good stuff. I think, I think at the time, it was kind of miserable and he didn't do this well, but in A, B, and C ways, like, I think what he did was really important. But the bad stuff that he did, I think would seem a lot less bad if he would just kind of acknowledge it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think so. I was interested to read and finally get some explanation of something that I had heard way back then. I think it was around 1982. My brother and I were in our local comics shop, and the guy who worked there was telling us how Jim Shooter was planning to kill off all the Marvel characters except Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. And we were like, what? And I think we probably wrote letters to Marvel saying, no, don't do that. And then we never heard anything more about it. But, reading the book, I could finally see what happened and why it didn't come about. But I was interested to finally get some proof that was really an idea that was discussed.
Yeah, and that's another weird thing where, it's almost Nixon-like because it sounds like it was never that close to actually happening, but then Jim Shooter denied that it was going to happen at all. Like he vehemently, denied and basically said that the people who said that there were plans were liars. And so that just kind of lingers, but that was something that I was trying to chase down for a long time. Was I wanted to see like a memo of it or something, but all I have is the contradictions in public statements that suggest that it was true, and a couple people telling me, yeah, that was definitely in the planning stages.
Mm-hmm. But of course, if you reboot and start a new universe, eventually you got the same old problem of the continuity kind of going berserk. I think they found that with the Ultimate line later.
Yeah.
So it only solves the problem temporarily.
But it solves the problem for the business side of things in terms of, the problem of how do we sell more copies next month,
Mm-hmm.
and it solves, to a degree, it solves a problem for creators or the creative team, in that this will kind of just be a new story to tell that's not totally cyclical for a while until it is really cyclical.
Yeah, well, and people get killed and then they come back and
right. And that's another thing that I was trying to figure out my own subjectivity about, and I do think that somewhere in the 1990s, it was all that killing people and bringing them back and going to different timelines. I do think that was stretched and stretched and stretched until it broke, and to the point where I don't really see, the comic books that Marvel publishes. It almost just they seem kind of, just these fractured little worlds that no longer really are part of the same narrative that they used to be.
Well, and it's interesting how, well, you show in the book how the mainstream media kind of get punked on the deaths of Superman and Captain America, because they cover them and like, oh, what does this mean? Why is Superman being killed or whatever? And then he comes back and like, well, wait a minute, you said he was dead. Doesn't that mean, dead? But
yeah. Well, yeah, the way that comic books are covered is a really funny thing too. I mean, after all these decades of condescension toward comic books, now I feel like there's just this total willingness to play ball with like the publicity machines for the major comic book companies. And if you read, you'll read something about like, oh, this big event promises to be this, in a major newspaper or magazine or website, and there's no real, there's no real interrogation of what comic book companies are actually doing. Not that they're like big tobacco, but that it would be great if not even the mainstream media. It's people who cover comic books, comic book sites, that really just kind of parrot whatever someone at Marvel or DC, tells them. And so I think the death of Captain America is not the last time we're going to see somebody get punked, because, it's really just, I don't know. I guess movies are like that now too. I guess people are not generally upsetting the Hollywood machine when they write about it. But
yeah,
I don't know. I guess I'm just cranky there. Sorry.
So what would you say is the most interesting reaction you've gotten to this book? I don't know if there were any astonishing reactions that I got. But I would say the most satisfying reactions were people who had worked for years and years at Marvel and who told me that they understood it better now that they'd read the book. Mm-hmm. It helped somebody actually. I think maybe this was in a way, the best thing someone had told me, the most flattering thing someone had told me, which was that
they, after reading the book, were able to let go of bitterness that they had toward some of the people that they worked with, because now they understood what was going on.
Wow.
And what other people were dealing with in stressful times. And that meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
Somebody felt like they had closure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome.
And that was somebody who I hadn't even interviewed, and who just kind of wrote me out of the blue.
So they could say, "Oh, that's what was going on. That's why they did this thing that I interpreted as being horrible."
Right. Exactly.
I see. Yeah, interesting. So, the comics industry has changed a lot over the years. Really, even since the 90s, it's changed a lot. But for someone who wants to work as a comics creator, what can they learn from this book?
I think just seeing the history of what's happening, or what's happened in terms of ownership or equity. I think if somebody is looking to work, do work for hire, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I think just being as clear-eyed about that as possible. I do think that that's something that this book could be useful for them. I do think that people are a lot less, I think just generally, people who go into the industry are less naive than they used to be. It would be hard to not know about, I went from Jack Kirby to Todd McFarlane, but I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are just, happy to be able to draw Moon Knight and don't really want to question anything,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of depressing how many kind of storylines in this book end with the writer leaving in disgust.
Yeah. It's true. And I do, I mean, it's also true that, conflict is interesting. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Oh, like a gunshot. As I said, conflict is interesting. Conflict is interesting, and much more interesting than, contentment. And so I'm sure that there are people who have worked in the industry who would say, this is kind of a negative, all a negative light. And by all means, that, there are a lot of people who knew exactly what they were getting into with every contract they signed, and who had an enjoyable working experience. Mm-hmm. Probably not many of those people who were working in the 90s. I don't necessarily see it as I don't necessarily see the book as a cautionary tale, like, don't work for a comic book company. But I do think that, there's definitely a lesson to not, to not just like be blindly loyal to a corporation. I think that is kind of a lesson, because you don't know who's going to buy your employment next. Mm. And just, you can be loyal in terms of, quid for quid, but I think with Marvel Comics, there's a mistake that grown adults make, where they invest a kind of idea of benevolence or sweetness into a company because its product makes them feel good. Mm-hmm. how could Spider-Man possibly betray me? You know,
or Mickey Mouse, or why would anyone hate Disney?
Yeah. And you know, whereas Marvel Entertainment is, you know, it's not really necessarily good or bad. It's just business.
Yeah. So what's coming next from you?
I am working on I'm at the very beginning stages of working on a book about the guy who founded High Times magazine.
Okay.
Who was a very fascinating character who led a very packed life until he shot himself in the head in 1978. But underground newspaper guy, and kind of champion of punk rock, and radical activist, and kind of generally crazy. so it's it'll be a lot different than writing about the history of offices.
Yeah, well, I wonder if probably a High Times reader who sent Jim Starlin a joint.
Yeah, right.
A little bit of a connection there, maybe.
Yeah, and there's actually there's a great article on the cartoonist Von Bodie in I think it's an article in like a 1976 High Times that's written by Denny O'Neil.
Oh,
that's pretty interesting.
What was it about?
There are some.
What was this article about?
It's about Von Bodie, the creator of the Cheech Wizard.
Okay. What's that?
The underground comic character that was later appropriated by graffiti artists, and so then became kind of a little bit of a hip hop icon. There's actually a Beastie Boys song that mentions Von Bodie. Yeah, so it's like Trina Robbins does some art, some comics. High Times used to have a comics section, which I mean, all this I'm kind of learning for the first time. I was reading about the guy who founded it, and then I, of course, for research, went on eBay and ordered all these old High Times magazines, and they're much, much more interesting than the handful that I saw in people's college dorm rooms in the 1990s, which were, about, it's like, I think somebody said garden tips and hippie bands.
This is Tim, back to the present in 2025. Marvel Comics' The Untold Story by Sean Howe is published by Harper. Follow us on Blue Sky at Decon Comics. On Facebook, we have both a page and a group. Those are linked from deconstructingcomics.com, as is our YouTube channel, where our episodes are posted every week as videos of a single image. You can comment on our episodes on YouTube or on our site, or drop us a line at mail@deconstructingcomics.com, or talk to us. Click the Leave a Voicemail link on the left sidebar of our site. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. The music backing the promotion of our Patreon is Change by Jazar. Next week, Emmett and I continue our reading of Jack Kirby's 1970s work. This time, his final regular issue of Captain America and the Falcon, number 214, from 1977, plus Captain America Annual number 3 from 1976. That annual is quite a ride, so join us for that discussion next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.